Hello, friends and residency candidates, and welcome to today's live where we are going to be discussing so much that's going to be helpful for interview prep and interview practice. So if you're getting ready for your residency interviews right now, then make sure that you stay tuned for this live, that you leave your questions in the comments, and we're going to get to as many of those as possible today. So again, we're going to be talking about some interview prep, talking about some of the most common questions and how to answer them. If you've had interview experiences so far, also make sure that you leave some of your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear how everything has been going for you. So I can't wait to dive in. I'm going to be joined here by Tiffany, and we're going to try to get to some of the most pertinent questions. We're actually going to be having a series of interview prep lives, so make sure that you stay tuned for those. We've also had a lot of interview prep videos coming up on YouTube, so if you haven't checked those out, make sure that you do that as well. Up here, and we're going to get going right into it. So again, if you have questions, experiences, comments, concerns, make sure you leave them in the comments, and we're going to get to them as they roll in. But welcome, Tiffany.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Or I guess I should ask, how are you doing today, Zeph?
I'm doing pretty well. And how about yourself, Tiff?
Definitely good. Really excited, actually, to talk about all of the cool things we're going to talk about when it comes to residency interviews, because this has been the biggest topic that's coming into all of our DMs and coming in through emails. People just have all these great questions, and I think we're going to be able to answer a lot of them today.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I'm excited to dive in. So where should we start?
I think it's best to start with the actual interview setup. So I'm going to ask if you, being somewhat of an expert, I think, with setting up for really great lighting and camera angles, if you can share some tips with all of our viewers about how to really make sure that all of the technological components are how they should be when it's time for that virtual interview.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of components that come into play and that everybody should be keeping in mind. Something that a lot of people miss is your internet speed. So if you actually have slow internet, or you have historically had issues with connectivity, maybe you should consider investing in a little bit quicker internet during the interview season. That's going to make sure that your interviews are more smooth and flawless, especially if you're overseas. Then being able to have that quick internet access is going to make that interview experience a lot more just connective, and you don't have these interruptions which could distract the interviewers from the actual presentation of who you are and why you're interested in the program. So that's one tip. Another question that people often have is what sort of backdrop or background should they have? And there's a few different options, and Tiffany and I right now are both demonstrating one of those options. So the first option is basically like a blank background. It's a neutral colored wall. It's white or probably a light color rather than something very dark. And it basically is just zero distractions. They're just focused on you, and that's the backdrop. So that's one option. Another option is to have a minimal background. So I could have maybe one small like plant or a little picture that's not very, doesn't draw too much attention, provides a little bit of color, a little bit of life, just like a minor decoration in the background. So that would be another option. And then the third option is to have something compelling or engaging in the background. Like I see a bunch of awards in the background for Tiffany, like medals. I'm like, if I'm the interviewer, I'm going to ask, like, are those yours? Why are those there? Did you win those for some reason? And so you could have something like a bookshelf, and maybe they'll ask you what sorts of books you like to read, or perhaps it's even a musical instrument that you actually play. And if you watched our interview with Dr. Fisher, he asked somebody to play the guitar for him, and they ended up giving them a contract. So it's having something engaging can actually be very beneficial for adding some of the conversation and the personal aspect to the interview. So the backdrop, again, you can have a blank canvas, a minimal backdrop, or something engaging or interesting to hook the interviewer's attention. Now, in terms of lighting, there's also a few different options. it's best to have some sort of lighting because you never know, what time of day it's going to be, or, if you're in a room with natural lighting, whether it's going to be sunny or cloudy, or if the sun's going to come in and out. So being in a controlled environment with a controlled lighting is very helpful. So a lot of people use the ring lights, which is basically like a big circle, the light, and that works. Some people with glasses might find that it leaves a glare for them. And so you'd have to angle it sort of like above your head so that the ring light doesn't make a big glare on your glasses. Same with any sort of light you have. You could also just use a light with a light bulb and like an umbrella kind of covering the light bulb to create more of a soft lighting around your face rather than the ring light. And of course, something that's also very helpful is to make sure that your clothing is prepared. It should obviously be business formal. Make sure that it's ready, pressed the day before. And in case you haven't heard, some programs are even asking people what they have, from the waist down. So make sure you're wearing something from the waist down, and ideally that would be professional and appropriate, part of the rest of your suit, just in case they ask. Be warned that that is a possibility. And then two other notes that I would recommend is that you might consider investing in a webcam, basically a high definition external camera, just so you get a little bit better video quality. And then also like a USB microphone that you can actually connect into your computer and use that so that you have very high audio and high video quality. And you combine that with high internet speed, a pleasant backdrop of some sort, and then the good lighting and professional attire, you're going to be all set for a very positive interview experience and performance.
Yeah, and once you have thought about all of these different components and you feel that you have everything set up, it's a really great idea to FaceTime with somebody or set up a Zoom meeting with a friend or family member and have a little chat and record that chat so that afterward you can watch it back. You can even take a look at your eye contact and see if you were looking at the right place on your computer or your camera, if you have an external one like Zach recommended. So having all of the practice that you can just when it comes to the visual components of your interview is really important. You definitely do not want to sit down for the first time 20 minutes before your interview and be messing with a light and a microphone and your camera, hoping that it all comes together. Yeah, do that at least a day ahead of time.
Yeah, and everybody knows technology is so unpredictable, and you might plug it in and turn it on one day and it's working, and then the next day something changed. You maybe adjusted a setting and didn't realize it. And so it's so important to get familiar with your own technology. And another tip that Tiffany briefly mentioned is the eye contact. And it's kind of weird, but you want to be looking at the camera. You're not necessarily going to be looking at the person because, let's say my camera was over here. I'm talking, or let's say my camera was basically off center for some reason, or the screen was off center to the camera and I'm looking at the screen. It's going to look like I'm looking away from the person even though I'm looking at them. So you want to make sure that you're actually looking at the camera so it always seems that you're actually making good eye contact with that person.
Yeah, exactly. And to speak just a little bit more about being prepared. So, we said the day before, at least is a good time to set everything up and maybe do a quick run through with a friend. But then on the actual day of your interview, what I recommend is before you get dressed and get ready and are actually thinking about sitting down for the interview, so maybe an hour or two before, set everything up, test it out, make sure that everything is perfect, then get ready and still allow yourself 20, 30 minutes to double check that everything's working as it should. And then you can go over your answers. You can have a cup of tea, you can meditate, whatever you want to do, but having the confidence that everything is working smoothly and then having some time to kind of relax and feel prepared just prior to your interview can really help your overall tone and your demeanor instead of feeling rushed and stressed and, sitting down at the last minute.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more that getting ready the day of and making sure that you are 100% ready to go 20 to 30 minutes before your interview starts. It's going to give you that time to, walk around, sit down, chill out, really be centered and calm for the actual interview because they're picking up on, your energy and what your demeanor is like. And if you're just stressed out and you're looking flustered, they're gonna be like, whoa, what's going on? So I totally agree with that. And in terms of actually, preparing, practicing interview prep, what are some good guidelines or best practices for just, diving into this seemingly overwhelming arena of the residency interview?
Yeah, so I've got quite a few tips to share about that. Enough tips that I have a handy dandy notebook just to make sure that I don't skip anything, because I
Yeah.
think this section about the overall how do you prep is just so important. So the tip that I want to start out with is just a little bit more on something that you've already addressed, Steph, and that's your appearance. So being professional in your interview happens two ways. One is that you're prepared to give good responses and answers to the question, but the other is really all about the way that you appear visually. So we're making this immediate first impression as soon as the camera clicks on. So I think it's really simplistic and accurate to say you need to look like you tried. Whatever that means for you. So for some people, they're going to wear a suit and tie. For others, that's not them and they don't want to not be themselves, and that's okay. But you need to, as you said, be business formal, maybe business casual if that is more true to who you truly are and you'll be more comfortable. But either way, you need to look like you put time into your appearance and that you cared, because that conveys that you're taking the interview seriously, that you didn't just sit down after you came back from a workout or rush in the door from grocery shopping and sit down for your interview, that you've taken the time. So that's number one. Make sure that you are prepared to look professional. Number
Mhm.
two is thinking about being really polished with your responses. And this is a tricky one. This is one of the top questions that I receive is how do I get my answers ready so that they are well received by the program directors and the residents and anyone else who you're interviewing with? And there's a broad spectrum here. There's winging it and being very underprepared, and then there's being way over rehearsed and what I would call over prepared, so that you're almost coming across as though you're reading a script, and you don't want that. You want to be somewhere right in the middle. um, and the way that you do that is by, I suggest, preparing for each of your questions that you're preparing for. You're going to have either a paragraph that you've written or a list of bullet points that are your key points that you're going to talk about. Those two strategies, one will work better for some people than the other. So whatever is more comfortable for you, bullet points or paragraph, that's completely fine. Then what you want to do is you do want to memorize those key ideas and the order that they should go in. So flow and going from one topic to the next is really important so that you don't sound choppy and all over the place and like you're jumping around and oh I forgot this and oh I forgot to bring up that. So you want to know those key points in the order that you want to present them, and then you want to practice a minimum of 10 different times. And as much as possible, you want to do that in different scenarios. So on the phone with someone, while you're driving in your car by yourself, leaving a voicemail to yourself, talking face to face with someone in a Zoom, any different type of practice session that you can get where you're having the opportunity to deliver that answer is exactly what you need. So the idea, this is the analogy I like to give. It's like telling a story to a friend on Monday. So let's pretend that you experienced some really interesting event on Friday evening, and then you go to work and you're conveying that event to a coworker on Monday. And you know what happened, you know the timeline, so you tell the story comfortably. You've got maybe some exclamations that you inject, and it's a very natural conversation. Then on Wednesday, you go to your family's house to have dinner and you tell your brother the same story. It's going to be essentially the same, but you're going to tell a little bit differently because you're comfortable with all the key facts and the order that everything happened in, but you're just delivering it naturally again. And when we speak naturally about something we know about, it comes across just a little bit different each time. And that is how you want your answers to feel conversational, not over rehearsed, but well prepared so that you're not struggling with the content.
So I have a question about that, which is, how many bullet points should be in, an average question? Should it be like 10 bullets or 2 or 3?
So a lot of that depends on, well, two key factors. One is how fast you talk. If you're a very fast talker, then you can fit more in a certain time frame. If you are a little bit more slow and methodical in the way that you speak, as you can tell, I just slowed down intentionally right here, then you're not going to be able to have as many bullet points. So it really does depend on your natural speaking pace because you don't want to try to adjust that too much. It'll be very hard to be thinking about slowing down or speeding up while you're trying to deliver your answers. So
Mhm.
figure out how quickly you can deliver something and then actually time yourself as you're doing these practice sessions with your responses. And really anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds is a pretty good place to be. Of course, every time you deliver it, you're probably going to come in at a little bit different of a pace. But by keeping your answers short between that like 30 and 90-second window, you're giving your interviewer time to ask follow-up questions. And then you can expand, be polished, prepared, and intentional. There's a separate video for that on our YouTube channel. And in the next several days, you'll also see videos for two other really common questions, which is tell me why you chose this program or why you want to join our program, and then why did you choose your specialty? So we're going to be having videos on those two questions that will go into detail and help you prepare.
Perfect. And that's going to be on another live.
Those will actually also be YouTube videos.
Okay, great.
Yep. We will link them in our bio on Instagram, and we'll probably feature links in the story as well. So there'll be lots of ways you can get to them, but they usually go up first on YouTube. So if you don't already subscribe to us on YouTube, definitely do that. We typically have several videos coming out every week on topics that are really relevant to this moment in the application season. So it's definitely a good place beyond Instagram to get content that's even a little bit more in depth than what you see here.
Wonderful. All right. So let's dive in and see if we have any questions about interviews.
Okay.
All right. So do you want me to check out the questions and see if
Yeah.
all right, I'm going to scroll back to the top here. Getting there. Yeah.
You got one?
You can go for it. I'm still getting to the top.
Okay. One other thing I will mention, and I actually did mention this in our last live that we did on Instagram, is that we do have a really comprehensive interview prep service. And guess what? There's going to be a YouTube video coming out on that as well. And one of the really interesting aspects of that interview prep service is that there is a section in it where you can record your responses to any interview question that you want, and it actually tracks your eye movement and your engagement, and it gives you this feedback about the vocabulary that you've used, the pace of your speaking. So really, really in-depth feedback on how you look on camera, on how you deliver those responses virtually through a screen. So I think that really, what more could you ask for than having detailed feedback on several, well, more than several. I mean, there's lots and lots of different questions that you can set up and answer for. So if you're interested in that, just send us a DM and we'll send you the link so you can check out everything that's available with the interview prep service.
Yes, definitely one of the most important things is to practice. And not only does practice make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect.
Yes.
All right, so I'm just going to dive into some questions here. So is there any harm in scheduling most of my interviews in December and January so I have more time to prepare? Does it change the way programs rank us?
No, there's definitely no harm in scheduling later on in the season. In fact, it's possible that by interviewing later, your interview will be even more fresh in the program's minds. They'll remember a little bit more about your personality and how they felt about the interview if it's later in the season versus earlier. That's not to say that interviewing now in October is a bad thing at all. Most programs have systems where they are taking notes and ranking how the interviews go so that when it comes time to revisit their rank order list, they're not forgetting about early interviews either. But there really is not harm in doing late interviews in any way.
Perfect. So another question that came up was, can you give a demo answer? So for example, Tiffany, if you had to tell me about yourself, how would you answer that question?
Um, Interestingly, I'm well prepared to answer this question because in the YouTube video that I did on Tell Me About Yourself, I did prepare my own answer. So I practiced it many times. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a go. You know, forgive me for errors since I was not anticipating this question. But in this answer, so ask me again.
Can you tell us about yourself?
Sure, definitely. So I had been working since the age of 16, and I didn't really seek out having a job in high school, but I was a gymnast, and the gym where I took lessons at invited me to teach gymnastics within the facility. And the pay was really good. I'm embarrassed to say how many years ago it was, but it was $12 an hour, which even by today's standards is not horrible. So I said yes, and it was amazing. My first job was one that I absolutely loved, and it never felt like work. It also gave me a taste of responsibility and having a paycheck, which was really awesome at 16 years old. So I started working for my dad's business on the weekend. So I was going to high school, earning good grades, working two jobs, and what happened was that I developed this really amazing sense of ownership for the work that I do. So no matter what kind of job I take on, or even if it's something at home, like I have a big dog and I have trained him pretty well, if I say so myself, because I take everything very seriously once I make a commitment to it. And I think that all stems back from when I was 16 and having a lot of different responsibilities. I think most people who know me would probably say that I'm a bit of an overachiever, and maybe that adds to my stress level. But overall, I think that it's actually a really good thing, and it's one of the characteristics I'm really proud of.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
All right, we have another question here. How long does it take to prepare for the interview?
Gosh, I don't think there's a limit. I think the more time that you can invest in preparing for an interview, the better. So you have to think of it this way. You're going to have one set of questions that is going to be used to prepare for all interviews. So tell me about yourself, the why this specialty, all of those more generic types of questions. And those you should prepare just as much and as often as you can. You know, if you're not interviewing until December, start preparing now. Those answers will be like second nature to you, and you have all this time to improve and add things and get feedback. So you know, the sky is the limit. Then, of course, you're going to have the more specific questions. Why this program? Those are a little bit harder to prepare for because you don't know how much time you're going to have. Maybe you'll have an interview coming up in 2 weeks that you don't even know about today. So you really just want to invest as much time as you possibly can in preparing for all of your interviews. It's obviously it's what's going to land you your match. So it should be your focus and your priority right now.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Another question is, how important is eye contact to the camera? Can we look away for a few seconds, or does that look bad?
Yeah, it doesn't look bad. So it's natural. As human beings, we don't always just stare right at each other or stare at the camera screen. And this is especially true if you are asked a question that you have to think about for a moment. So I'm pretty sure that when the question came up for me to give a sample answer, if I go back and review this live, I bet you I looked away because I had to stop and think about it for a second. So, you know, don't worry about your natural human responses. If you need to look away for a moment, or if you just, it's not if you need to, it's just if you do, that's okay. Now, if you go like this, that's not good, right? You don't want to like hide away and hide your face and really be over here. But if you break eye contact, look up, look down to the side, these things are okay.
Exactly. We have a couple comments about whether this is recorded, and people want to watch it from the beginning. And be assured, it will be on IGTV. It's also going to be posted to YouTube, as are all these joint lives. So yeah, you'll definitely be able to watch the whole live event. All right, let's see. Try to get another question for us here. All right, do a couple more. Here we go. says, should we meet the program coordinator and how to approach?
So it's possible that the program coordinator is going to take part in your interview, and some people have more than one interview. So maybe over 2 days, they're meeting first with some residents and then with the program director, and then a follow-up with the chief resident and program coordinator. So, if your question is, will you meet with the program coordinator? That's completely dependent on the particular program and how they set up their interviews. You may very well be meeting with the program coordinator, or you might not. If you do, it's really the same thing that we've been talking about during the whole live. You want to be prepared. You even want to research what types of questions that specifically a program coordinator might ask you, because they might have different questions than the program director.
Mm-hmm. Up next, we have, is a t-shirt okay in the resident meet and greet?
I would not wear a t-shirt even for the resident meet and greet. I think that is too casual. The residents are judging you too. They're going to be giving feedback about how the meet and greet went to the program director, and they're going to be talking about the impression that you made on them. So I would err on the side of caution. Like for some programs, that's totally fine. But in the event that it's not, like I said, err on the side of caution. Maybe a polo, like what Zeph has on, it's a button-up shirt with a collar. I think that that's a much better and safer choice, even for the more casual events.
Mm-hmm. Says, if we make some wrong answers initially, how can we address them later?
So there's two possibilities for that. One is that you give a wrong answer, or you're talking and you realize, oh my gosh, I want to put my foot in my mouth. That is not what I wanted to say. That's not how I wanted to say it. If you realize it in the moment, as soon as you realize it, stop and say, I'm sorry, that is not what I meant to convey, or that's really not how I meant to answer that particular question. Would it be okay if I started over? So there's not a problem with that. Just like I said, don't keep going on and trying to fumble around your words. Just stop, apologize, and ask if you can start over. If you get all the way through an answer and you move on, you have different questions, then you get to the end of the interview. It is okay to say, is it okay if we rewind back to a question that you asked me when we first started? You had asked me X, Y, and Z, and I'm not sure that what I said really expressed the answer that I wanted to give. Could I answer that question again? So they might say, no, we don't have time for that. And then you're out of luck, but there's no harm in asking. And it shows that you are really engaged in the interview and that you're reflecting on the answers and that you care. So there's no harm in asking to start over with one particular question, right? Not start the whole interview.
Yeah. Can we do this whole thing again, please? Yeah, and it's important to realize that the interview is to some degree a conversation, and it is okay to, act accordingly. It shouldn't just be a one direction question, answer, question, answer. I mean, you definitely will encounter some interviews that are more like that. And then you're going to have others that are more conversational. So being able to understand those lines and, professionally communicate in a way where, you can say, I actually just thought of something when you asked me about, this or that. Something else I want to add to that is, and then you explain it within the right context and, assuming that there's time for it as well. And as Tiffany mentioned, you can always ask as well. So we have a question, what should we talk about during residence interview? Like when, I'm assuming that means when residents interview the applicant.
Yeah, so that's just really all dependent on how it's set up and what questions the residents have for you. So I have heard of some resident interviews just being very casual, more along the lines of a meet and greet, even though they're not called a meet and greet, where the resident just pretty much leaves it up to you. So, what questions do you have? Do you want to hear about the program? And which leads into the second type of common resident interview, which is where they're going to tell you all about the program and their experience and the program culture and the neighborhood or city life where the program's at. So they might start off by sharing with you and then ask you if you have any questions. So I think for the most part, the resident interview can be considered something that is a little bit less formal than the program director interview. And you probably do not need to have these well-prepared answers in the same way that you do need for the program director. You should be prepared to ask questions about the program and about the experiences that the residents have had in the program.
Yeah, I would say try to get to know the program. And like Tiffany said, get to understand the culture of that residency program. Get to know that person, ask them, what do they like to do in their free time? Do they hang out with other residents after work? What do they like to do around the area? Get to know them. It shows that you're engaged, you're interested, and they'll probably be sparked to ask you more questions based on your questions. So the more personal and personable you can make those interactions and connections, and again, memorable experiences, memorable conversations, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, and a tip on that too, in our world today, right? Social media is this huge thing. And one example that I can give is at Match a Resident, we have brand ambassadors who are on Instagram, and they are Instagram influencers. They really like and love to talk about their experiences as PGY1s, PGY2s, chief residents, and they are sharing and engaging with the medical student and IMG and residency community. So if you have an interview with a program, there is absolutely nothing wrong with checking out who its residents are and see if any of them are really active, and if they're sharing their stories and they're recording videos. If they're doing that, they want you to see it. So if you go into that resident interview and you say, yeah, actually, I followed your Instagram account the other day. I just love these videos that you're making. That's a really good thing. They're not going to think that you're creepy because they're an influencer. They're out there. They're making stuff for you guys to see. And it's actually, I think, almost, well, I would say it's definitely smarter to be aware of that and bring it up than it would be to act like you don't know about it or have just not looked into it at all.
Mm-hmm. All right. When researching programs, what are important aspects to focus on for the interviews?
When it comes to specific programs, so that's going to be a video in and of itself, but I'll share a little bit of that content right now. So like many of the other topics we talked about, there's kind of a step-by-step process. In a nutshell, you want to start with reviewing the program's website so that you are super, super familiar with everything to do about that program and the institution in general. Don't just limit yourself to the residency program website. Go a little bit bigger, a couple steps up, and look at the entire facility. From that point, you want to take a look at who is the program director. And again, maybe they're in social media. If you've seen our YouTube channel, we have a lot of interviews with like Dr. Conrad Fisher, and he has a lot of things to say about residency and the match process. Maybe the program director where you're interviewing does too. So watching those videos, following those people on social media, it's all going to give you more insight into knowing about the program and being able to talk about why you're interested in the program. And the last thing that I'll mention is be very aware of any research activity that's going on within the program, any community-based initiatives that are happening, anything that program is doing, you want to know about it. And you don't necessarily just want to spout out everything you know about the program. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to connect what you learned about the program with your professional aspirations and your strengths and make that come together in a way that shows the program like they know about us, they like us, and they're going to be a great fit.
Wonderful. And so we have a follow-up question regarding the resident interviews, which is, will the residents give feedback to the program director?
Most certainly, yes. I think that there would be, I can't even imagine a reason that the resident would be participating in an interview if they were not going to be giving that feedback back to the program director.
Right, exactly. All right, well, that was the most recent question. I'm just going to rewind real quick to the top, but I think, we've covered a lot of the main questions. Like Tiffany said, we're going to be releasing more content. If you haven't gotten interview invitations, consider sending letters of interest to the residency programs. Those can be very helpful. We had a whole live last week and discussion about letters of interest and thank you letters and how to write them. We actually just published a complete guide for doing so at Residency Experts, which is residencyexperts.com. It's going to explain everything that you should be looking to include and incorporate and talk about in these letters of interest, which we're not kidding when we say if you seriously send these to specific programs and tailor each letter very uniquely for those programs, you will get more interviews. People that send the letters of interest, they're garnering interest in their application. So definitely recommend considering that. We're going to be discussing thank you letters for after your interviews in upcoming videos and blogs as well. So any final thoughts here for us, Tiffany?
Last thing is that on Thursday, so in just 2 days from now, I'm going to be back live on Instagram. It'll be just me this time. And I'm going to just be focusing on our interview prep services and going over exactly there's 2 different packages, and I'm going to go over exactly what those include, how they can help you, and answer any questions so that if you've been thinking about moving forward and purchasing one of the interview prep packages, you'll kind of know everything about it before you go ahead and make that final step. So that's going to be on Thursday, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, right here on Instagram, and it'll be another live interactive Q&A just like this one, but just me.
Great. Yeah, and I have just 2 final comments as well, which is, for those members of Match Resident who are registered, make sure you're using your interview manager tool to schedule your interviews. Make sure that you're reading the interview feedback, which is a critical part of your program research, is to really dive into that feedback and those experiences from previous applicants who have interviewed at that program. And then after your interview, make sure you're using the Rank Assist tool. It's so important to use that survey soon after your interview, because otherwise, if you do it in February, you're just going to forget. Your interviews are going to blend together, and the survey won't be as helpful in determining and informing your rank decisions. But as Tiffany said, make sure you tune back in this Thursday in just 2 days at 12 p.m. Eastern for some more interview prep tips, advice, and help.
Absolutely.
All right. Best wishes, everybody, and take care for now.
Bye, everybody.